It's a Wednesday web chat, and I'm Kanan Chandran, the publisher of stormasia.com. This is our regular series of discussions on topics that are current, that are trending, and we'd like to bring in different people to lend their voices in the whole discussion. It's also an opportunity for the audience to ask questions of the panelists, and we'll try and go through them as we go along. Today's session, it's about the media. Then and now is the topic, and we're looking at what the media looks like now, what will it look like in the future, what have we done with it, what have we achieved with it. I think one of the biggest things that has come through is a smartphone. The smartphone has given people a voice. Everybody who used to have to look at the newspaper or the television set to get the information can now be part of that process. They can record things, they can post it on their sites, on the various social media platforms, and they can become an avenue for the news and the information to flow through. It could be food reviews, it could be holiday staycations, it could be an accident, it could be whatever. But you have the opportunity to do that. So it's liberating in that regard, in that you're not stuck to having to follow with a bigger organization that has control over the media. But of course, on the flip side, you have all the other things that come along with it. You have the people who take advantage of the situation, you have the fakes, you have the scams, and all those things, which you also have to be mindful of. So there are many things that have reshaped the media space. End of the day, though, what is it about? It's still about communicating. It's still about expressing yourself. It's about presenting the facts, presenting an opinion at times. And so it's open to everybody now to add their voices in the mix. And it's also very entertaining if you're on certain platforms. So now, who do we have here on the panel? We've got Ilyas Sholihyn, who's the editor-in-chief of Rice Media, a digital publication known for its investigative reporting, cultural commentary, and human interest stories in Singapore. Irene Hoe, who has spent most of her time in the newsroom as a columnist and editor. We were colleagues at the Straits Times. Then she left and she continued writing and editing books. Bernard Lim, a familiar voice on the air. He has worked in broadcasting since his national service and university days. His voice was on Rediffusion, the Singapore Broadcasting Corporation, later MediaCorp. And Balji, who has worked in 5 newsrooms, including the Straits Times newspaper, and today, before stepping away from full-time journalism, only to author a book on the subject, The Reluctant Editor, the Singapore Media as Seen Through the Eyes of a Veteran Newspaper Journalist. So welcome, everybody, and great to have you all here. Let me just start off by asking what each of you think of the media scene at the moment. Let's start with you, Balji.
Why start with me?
Why not? You are the voice of experience.
Experience doesn't matter nowadays.
That sadly is true, yes.
The media scene today is so fractured, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. When you have more players, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you have more players, many more players, then you have a problem of finding out how you can be easily influenced, But that also happens if you just have one player. So I think the most important thing, the media scene today, I love it. I'm a great fan of the media scene today because I get a plurality of views, a plurality of news, and that is primarily caused by the internet. Not just Singapore, also overseas. I'm a great fan of the Financial Times in London. So I'm reading Financial Times, I'm reading The Guardian, I'm reading the Washington Post. So I get many, many more views than what I used to when only the mainstream was the source of newspaper. But where the one problem is today is, I'm talking about Singapore now, that the mainstream media is playing catch up with the online media, and I must say that they are failing. I think one of the points that you mentioned earlier, Kanan, is that what do you get from the media? What do you want from the media? I'm not so interested in information as I am interested in the knowledge. That means I want more of the context of the news. Then I can use that knowledge, analyze that knowledge, and I can tell my grandsons, show them that I'm a great man. I know a lot of things. So and from a personal point of view also, and a professional point of view, I would like articles which will go behind the news, not just the news. The news is it comes out every hour, every minute, So I'm not really interested in that anymore. But I'm interested in the backdrop of the news. So coming back to your original question, where is the media today? I think the media today is has lost the plot. Again, I'm talking about Singapore. I ask myself, what the media has told me something that is new, and I find that there's very little that they have told me that is new, because I've got most of the information via my mobile. So what's the relevance of a newspaper? The relevance of the newspaper is to go into analytical reporting, which is what I think is needed.
Analytical reporting and commentaries are something which Ilyas Rice is doing, right? A fair bit of. So maybe we'll swing to you at the other end of the spectrum of the journalistic career path and ask you, as the editor of Rice, how do you view the media, and what do you want to put across to your audience?
How do you exactly define news nowadays as well, right? So previously it was just newly received or noteworthy information on recent events. But I just want to echo a little bit on what Balji mentioned. The audience has moved past that already. They want to have they want to find some meaningful relevance to the things that they read, the content that they consume. And I would say it's becoming decentralized. People are not relying on the written word on news anymore. Sometimes it can just be a simple post on Instagram, can be a simple video on TikTok. That's the news. If you kind of like take a look at the data, I think most young folks, they are not using Google as a search engine. They're using TikTok as a search engine right now. So that's really like where they can get the news. News these days isn't just about like breaking updates or official announcements. It's become about capturing what's relevant, what's resonant, and relatable to specific communities. It's really about like reporting on what people are talking about in everyday life, what they're experiencing on the ground, and probably what's trending in online communities as well. That's why you see now viral aggregators like Mothership, Master News. They do this well in aggregating stuff that's on the ground on online communities, and audiences really respond to that positively. Like even a trending tweet or viral video can set the news agenda. And what becomes news right now is less about traditional authority, like top down, like what it used to be like top down approach. It's right now more about like collective resonance.
Irene, you've been in the newsrooms. You're now teaching students as well. How do you carry that across? You've got a lot of experience, but as Balji said earlier, does experience matter today? It's a very different environment. What do you bring across when you're talking to your students, and what do you use the media for these days yourself?
Well, it's I'm trying to get myself out of the habit, and I think I can't do it, of reaching for my phone. The first thing when I wake up, and then I'm checking what Balji said about context, about relevance, and the proliferation of news sources really kind of hits a chord with me, because I just turned and I looked at my phone and I thought, I've got easily about more than a dozen news apps on. I don't watch Netflix. I'm just basically a news hound, and now I'm, what do they call? I call myself a professional capo, because I love being plugged in to the world. And like Balji says, it's not just what is happening or just happened, but what does it mean? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for the people in, let's say, a particular country, for instance, when all this stuff happened with Israel and Gaza? I straight away kind of like messaged my friend and former classmate who is a doctor and a military doctor in Israel to say, are you all right? What's happening? So that feeling of being plugged in, and yet it also breeds a lot of anxiety. So it's important to use the news for me to be informed, to be in context, especially when I am teaching people to say, okay, why would you bother? So I would throw them a question, kind of an out of the blue question. What's happening in, let's say, one of my trick questions with SPH students before, SPH trainees before, was, okay, Czechoslovakia. And I was very upset once when during the whole session, nobody said, Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. And I just thought, you're all going to be professional journalists. Why don't you know that there's no such thing as Czechoslovakia? So that's the kind of teacher and trainer that I am. And this all kind of goes. So I'm right now, thinking of teaching possibly another university course with a foreign university. And thinking, how do I project all this to them? Because if I get the job, many of the students will be from China. And how do I set that in context for people from China? Where do you fit in this world? What is important about China to the world? Why is the rest of the world important to China? So I have to think about who I'm talking to, just as I used to when I was a reporter, and understand lots of things. And but right at the base of it is also the thrill of discovery. And I can say that Balji was quite responsible for that. One day he assigned me to cover the head of the NATO, who was coming to Singapore. And I went to him and I was in a panic. And I said, Balji, I don't know anything about this. And he said to me, what? So you don't know, that means whatever you don't know, that means I have to go and cover it for you. And I looked at him and I said, no, but, and then I just said, okay. So I went to the library, went to the university library as well, and hunted out all the stuff that I needed to do. And in the end, I did a decent story. So now, what is different for journalists now and for other people is that the information is just right out there for the taking. But a lot of people find that it's too much for them. So if I'm working on whatever, my job, I see it is even as a human being, as a citizen of Singapore, is to try and say, there's this happening. This is why you should know something about it. this is important to you?
Bernard, you've been in and out of the media space, still pretty much in it to some extent. Your journey has been quite fascinating, and your experience is probably a bit different to all of ours because of the amount of time you spent on television and on radio, right? So in that broadcast space. So what do you see different today? How do you use media?
Before I go to what my own sharing, I think it's important to also highlight the fact that when Irene mentioned about the first thing in the morning, fighting to get some news information, I remember I used to fight with my late dad for the first person to read the Straits Times. And we always have a little battle, a challenge, see who gets to read it first. But these days, you're absolutely right. When I get up, I turn to my left, my right, reach it to my phone or my iPad. I can read everything I want to know. And I have so quick access, it's so easy access. I think it's important to also understand that what people look out for news these days. I think in the last maybe 4 to 5 years, I think a lot of stress and emphasis about fake news. That has also changed many of us consumers as well. I see myself as a news consumer, just like many other people out there. So in that sense, I don't create the news, but I consume the news. So in the earlier days, it will be very much like timeliness. It will be like what the impact the news has on me. But these days, I do focus on things like how truthful are these news. I mean, half of the things I read on the internet, on the social media are pretty sensationalized news in that sense, that they are all really out to capture eyeballs, to capture you clicking onto the link and all that. Those are some of the things that I always get very annoyed when I click on the link and realize that there is really no substantial news in there. They just want to make me click their post. And therefore also got me to think about how being a journalist these days, I know what Balji mentioned about how it is very challenging to be able to present and report news that are more in-depth than just reporting via the press releases that they received. I think it's also the challenge of journalists to be able to, I would say, ability to decipher between fake and obviously sensational news and truthful, honest, and I would think impactful news. I think that is something I would imagine if I'm a journalist right now, that would be my challenge, especially if I'm a new journalist. I would think, is this a sensational news that I have to capture it to kind of spin it in that way, or is this a more impactful news? Obviously, as a journalist, if I'm a young journalist, I would want to report on sensational news that people talk about it. Hopefully, hit the front page or hit the front page of the internet online post, but is that the most necessary? I would think. I mean, a local designer used to tell me that, Bernard, you want to get all the attention walking down Orchard Road, you just run down Orchard Road naked. You know, but it's far more challenging to dress yourself up nicely and be getting all the attention by walking down Orchard Road versus stripping naked and running down. I thought that was a very interesting reminder that how sometimes we have a certain responsibility. I think somebody mentioned the word responsibility to be in the forefront versus just to fight for clicks and fight for sensational attention, which I think that should be the challenge I feel for many journalists out there at the moment.
So all of you have raised something. I mean, talk about accessing the news almost immediately now. As you wake up, you reach and you read. So there is also the thing about breaking the news first, right? Being the first to break something. That's in play, I think, still. But sometimes you break it first now, but you don't necessarily check whether it's accurate. You just want to be the first to have it up on your site so that people will follow, people will click, you get more likes. It's less about, I look at it as less about sharing the information that you have and more about, hey, you guys, come on, click. I want more of you to click. Do you find that sort of altering the whole media landscape? You know, the equilibrium is being shifted.
Well, one of the things that amuses me is every so often I'll get something from LinkedIn to say that your post was viewed by blah, 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 and And sometimes I'll get it from Facebook or something. I can't remember the term for it. That you are top of the list of this and that and the other, and I'm thinking, I must be very old because it doesn't matter to me. And truth be told, I am very old. I'm 75. But I think it must matter to more people, even those who are not influencers. As somebody who never even wanted a photo byline, I don't get this. I really don't get this. But I have to understand that this is the state of play at the moment. What I wanted people to read and say, oh, she has something interesting to say. I didn't think about this before, and that was mine. So that's a very oldie kind of perspective, and I don't know how I would survive in today's media world because the whole the maybe you call it a metric, is speed. Get it out fast. But ours was, is it correct? Is it fair? Is it timely? But what is the provenance of your material? Who is saying this? Why are they saying this? Have you asked them? And that is something that disturbs me about some of the younger journalists that I meet now. And when I message, I'm still a professional capo. I message some people when they have, like the other day, Straits Times did this one where it said that Laos was the smallest country in ASEAN. And I straight away looked at it and I said, are you kidding me? You got to know that this is not true. And if you say this, every time we were always told, and I have been telling myself, when you say most, best, use any extreme term, justify it. And just straight off, even though I've not been in a newsroom for years, I straight away knew that it was not true, neither in population nor in size of the country. So I was very upset. I messaged an editor. I also messaged the reporter. The editor responded. The reporter didn't. It's like, I thought, is she telling me that not my problem? And that above everything would be distressing to me because it's really old versus new. I got the story out. I was on the front page. That's her thinking. And I just said, you started your story with the wrong information. And that is a whole different perspective of those who are, putting the news in. They can say, oh, well, I can always update it. That's not updating. That's correcting.
Yeah. That's true. And it's about responsibility. And if you also want to be the source of all news that is accurate and fact-checked, then you shouldn't allow this to happen.
But it's a sense of I'm responsible for what I put out. Yeah. Now, I think that there has been in the Straits Times a very fundamental difference in the way they produce the news and process it from before. Before it was very human to human. My editor would say, hello, what is this? This is not the right way to say this. And then we'll have a small discussion and then I'll go fix it. Now it's like, oh well, somebody changed it down the line, but who? And who has the final responsibility? As a copy editor, every time I did a story, I would say to the reporter, I will send you back the draft that has gone on and may even have left my hands, the draft that has gone on to the final thing where it's going to be produced. Have a read of it before deadline, before a production deadline. Some would, some wouldn't. Some reporters, like Bertha Henson, would sit right next to me until everything, questioning, how is this? How is that? Why did you change this? Why did you not like my intro? Why did you demote it to paragraph 3 or paragraph 4? And then I'd say, well, because that's actually old news. If you want to set it in context, fine. I don't know how much discussion goes on. I know that from my friends overseas that there's still a fair amount in the media that I respect. But in Singapore, where I'm getting my stomach churned up every at least a couple of times a week. So I'm upset.
Are you guys slaves to the algorithm as well? Chasing numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've been in a few old newsrooms in my previous employments where your KPI is kind of based on the number of views, the number of page views that you capture. I mean, that is the reality among modern digital newsrooms, especially startups. They don't have that big of a team. They only have a handful of reporters. They don't have who don't have specific beats to adhere to, and their job is basically just scan Facebook, scan Twitter, scan the internet to search for the biggest controversy or the biggest thing that's happening there. So it can be kind of disheartening, like all the things that we've learned in school about journalism, about accuracy, about taking the time to make sure your readers can process and digest it in a more meaningful manner. Sometimes that gets thrown out of the window entirely when you get to these newsrooms where the key is basically being the first, because it is kind of hard to be competitive when you're not only competing with other publications, you're competing with entire platforms, search engines, social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and all that stuff. So I think what really is the key question I guess journalists would ask is, how do you stay measured and responsible in content creation while still being able to capture people's attention? So I guess to your question, one of the things that modern young journalists have to do these days is being an algorithm appeaser. You really have to kind of you have to know your SEOs, your keywords, your search engine, making sure it will come out at the top of Google. You have to make friends with people who work in Google News Initiative, so you can get your news, your publication listed on Google News. So it's all these different relationships that you have to manage. So that really is taking some part away from the actual storytelling and actual story crafting and going on the ground and looking for stories. I guess for us at Rise, I think we are not in the business of breaking the news. We're in a more the slow journalism part of the editorial landscape. So we have a bit more time to make sure the articles, the content, the videos we put out are actually properly vetted and went through the whole rigmarole of fact checking, editing, going through several rounds, checking with the profiles, is this accurate and stuff like that.
Yeah. So it sounds like Google is really the editor-in-chief here, isn't it?
Exactly.
You have to structure everything to fit in with what their demands are. Now, does that make it more difficult to train a journalist? Balji, you've seen many journalists over the years, and although we can't see you because your video is off for some reason,
I don't know why. I can't
still want to hear you. Let's hear what you've got to say still.
I used to work in a newspaper called The New Paper, which was called Sensational, always looking for scoops. And we have made some big mistakes with scoops. But having said that, I think today that sense of wanting to get an exclusive, I will say, is no more there in our newsrooms. This may be a bit unfair, but I will say it. This is what is known as a press release newsroom. You wait for press releases and you report the news according to the press release. That's not a bad thing, actually. I mean, you can still do a reporting of the news of the press release in a more intelligent and in a way which people will understand. I would say that scoops and exclusives in the Singapore context, I would say that that is not going to happen on a regular basis because the government has a real control over the news. You can still be of some useful purpose if you take the government news, analyze it, and say what this means. So that is where I come from because no point hitting your head against a wall in an environment which is not for exclusivity. Everything must come from one source, you see. So the newspapers will have to find some other way to make themselves more meaningful. And I think one way will be to provide an analysis of the news on the same day, because I find that the Straits Times provides analysis a few days later. And it's in the comment perspective pages. And the articles are as long as my wife's sari, I don't want to read. But if you read Financial Times, and I'm a great fan of Financial Times, I mean, they say it so succinctly, not with long passages, but they get the point across. And that is my model for a newspaper. And FT is not doing badly, it is doing quite well. Its figures are showing a healthy profit. So why is it that we can't do it?
There's a question here, and I also want to bring it up in the context of what you just said about the press release journalism, Balji. It's from Arul, who's asking, has the new environment made it more difficult for all media regarding the flow of information by lying by omission, so not including salient points in their reports? Because it would not make the establishment look good. So is there a bias here in media houses towards certain organizations that will dictate and determine how the news is delivered, which then does not make it really a newspaper because it is not neutral, and also means can you trust it? Is there trust in the media? Bernard, you've been through a fair few of these sort of situations over the time. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think importantly for whoever the journalist, I think it's important to have your personal compass that you feel that this is a story that you want to carry. Obviously, in reality, we know there are many check and balances along the way. The companies that I worked in, there are many check and balances along the way. But as a journalist, I would say my very first principle for myself is that do I trust this story? Did I report this story in the best possible, honest way? And obviously, however you craft a story, different people have different style. When your editors, your bosses may have different way of interpreting the news. But I think as a journalist, especially a young journalist, that is important to answer to yourself that this is the best I can report. This is the most honest I can report. If the numbers don't lie, the numbers don't lie. So why should the headline not represent this, for instance? I mean, that's what I think. I will use my own little standards I set for myself.
Ilyas, how about yourself? You're in the thick of it.
The only thing that I can advise, I guess, to publications that are kind of like between a rock and a hard place, try to be sustainable in Singapore, but also trying to stay independent. I think it's really about a matter of outlining, like what Bernard mentioned, your compass, your moral compass. So I guess when you put it out, when you have that transparency with your readers, of your audience, on hey, this is what we do and this is what we don't do in terms of branded content or other external influences. Once you have it out there and make it clear, make it transparent to people, hey, these are our policies in terms of like talking about politics, or these are our policies in terms of agreeing to editorials, that kind of stuff. Once the readers have that trust by checking out that outline that you have, it'll be clearer to them, and then that will, I guess, build more trust among them.
A compass requires some education in terms of how to read it. Similarly, for a moral compass, do you think we've been taught well enough to read our own moral compass and apply it in the context of the work that we do?
It's not black and white. Sometimes, when in school, when in like in the course of training and all that, there's all these like clear parameters and all that. But when you get to real life, in reality and all that, sometimes your moral compass has to bend a little bit, because sometimes the reality is, for a publication to survive in Singapore, there are some certain things that you have to do. You gotta play. Sometimes you gotta play ball, like that stuff. Yeah.
I'd like to interject here, because referring to the recent kerfuffle over income and the income alliance supposed merger or takeover, and what I most appreciated about that was that two former chief executives of Income, which used to be a cooperative but is now not a cooperative anymore. And I'm ashamed to say that as a former journalist and as a income policy customer, I said I didn't know that there was this change. But two of these guys spoke up, and the media, everybody got into it. The Straits Times was a bit hesitant, it seemed to me. But all the others really got into it, and there was a reversal of that decision. And of course, the majority of the credit has to go to Tan Swee Chae and to a lesser extent Tan Kin Lian. But I thought, okay, these are the two people of consequence who spoke up. It requires that kind of thing, rather than what is more usually found in the social media, which is people complaining and saying, this is not done well, and so got a finger in the this, and all sorts of implications. But nobody's actually come out and said with authority something very important, which is what these two guys did. And I am very, very grateful that Shanmugam listened to Tan Swee Chae, whom he knows personally, and then there was a change. But it really is really down to mostly Tan Swee Chae for coming out. That was very brave of him. And I hope that will inspire other people to come out and say, yeah, I disagree with that, and this is why. Not just whine or just gripe about it online and hope that somebody will do something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah. Can I just add one? I'll make it very short. That what Irene mentioned about Tan Swee Chae and Tan Kin Lian, they had the social media that they could use.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
That is to me is a very significant factor. If there was no social media, for example, if there was no Facebook, would Tan Swee Chae and Tan Kin Lian have a platform to get across your point of view? No, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is a classic example when anybody says that social media is bad, social media is this. Yes, social media is not exactly the type of media we want, but if you use that platform wisely, in the right way, you can get things done. And this to me is a classic example of what social media how you can use social media.
Yep.
Exactly. Perfect. Well, as most of these discussions go, when it's getting very exciting and interesting, we have to stop because the times are up. But
Yeah.
I would like to bring two things together. There's a last question here, which I want to bring into you guys as well. It's from Jennifer, who says she's noticed that SCMP, South China Morning Post, is covering stories and interviews that the mainstream media are not. What are your thoughts? And where should Singaporeans go for real news on what is happening in the country? But I will take it a step further. If you'd like to address that question, by all means, please do. But also, where do you go for your news? Let's start with you, Irene.
Everywhere. I read Bryce, I read Jom, as well as occasionally Reddit. All the stuff that comes out, a lot of it is rubbish, but sometimes you find a gem in the middle of the rubbish. You want to see what people are thinking about it, what they're saying about it, even if they are talking in fairly rubbishy terms. And because this is the rest of the world, this is very important. And you particularly, for the same reason that I will also read, go and look to Fox News for American news, because most of the time I'm on AP, Reuters, CNN, and another source which I didn't expect to be good about the US, Guardian. So wherever you find it, and it should just all kind of go into one, like a pot of porridge in your head and stew around for a while, and then you think, okay, what does this taste like? What is wrong about it? What seems right about it?
Yeah, like you mentioned earlier, Google is my editor-in-chief. So I already have like a curated feed of of stories that will come through from Singapore, from Southeast Asia, rest of the world. So I mean, sometimes technology makes it a lot easier for you to consume stuff. So they will just feed you stuff that coincidentally I want to read. And yeah, I mean, it can be like from various sources. Like, can be from as big as Guardian, can be from as small as like Tech in Asia, that kind of stuff. So yeah, regarding the comments about CMP covering less mainstream news, I mean, it's good. I mean, SCMP is a big publication, and if you have that AAA budget, trying to focus on things that the other media industry, the rest of the media industry isn't covering, then all the power to them. I think it's pretty much like the same method that we employ at Rise. I mean, my team would often choose stories that reflect hyperlocal quirks, societal shifts, or pressing issues that matter in the daily lives of Singaporeans, but might be missed out by the larger news outlets like Straits Times, CNA. So it's really going down on the ground, speaking to people's experiences, communities, their fears and dreams. So in different publications have different missions.
I'm going to shock you all with this statement. That for me, for local news, there is no other place than the Straits Times and Channel News Asia. It is not the best newspaper, but there is information hidden in the stories, gems that are hidden. So you need to do a bit of a mental gymnastics to take these gems out and then see for yourself, hey, there's something more to this story. If you just rely on the headline and the introduction, the story is very dull. But if you dig deeper into it, into the story, if you go deeper into the story, when I mean deeper, I mean you read the story, if you have the patience, which I have now, I've got a lot of time, nothing better to do, you will find that the Straits Times is a kind of a repository of knowledge, a lot of knowledge there. But where the problem is, because I have worked in newspapers before, I have ability to read the news in such a way and say, oh, this is what he really meant. You know, the intro can throw away the intro, can throw away the headline, go somewhere in between, somewhere middle, and you can get something really valuable. Coming to the question of South China Morning Post, We must not forget that South China Morning Post is in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong until some time ago was a big rival of Singapore economically. And you also had a number of people who are Singaporeans, who some of them who worked in the Straits Times, who now work in South China Morning Post. So their knowledge of Singapore is quite good. So I think they must have seen that there is value, that there is value to develop the Singapore angle.
I like Balji. I don't analyze so much. Obviously, Singapore is CNA and Straits Times. Sometimes I look at the Business Times, but I do follow Mothership for the bit of that local, on the ground kind of a story. Obviously, overseas foreign news, I'll go for the two reliable, quick sources, whether it's a BBC or CNN. I do read Jom. I think Jom is quite interesting. I've been spending some time with Jom as well. So those are my regular news input. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for those different perspectives on the media. You brought in your own insights based on your experiences. It's good to see that some of the old principles can still stand in today's context, right? Because I think it's about the news, it's about telling people what's taking place, but also I think you need to do that one step extra and give a perspective, put context in place. I think there's just a bit too much of getting it out there too quick and too fast and not fact-checking properly. And that's causing a lot of other issues. A lot of people out there get their news directly from their WhatsApp group chats and their Facebook. And okay, it's still a source of news, but ultimately, if you look at it, it's about telling a story and about telling it well. How well you tell it matters, right? So as Balji pointed out, social media can be used effectively. So I think it's a very useful tool that is now part of the arsenal for journalists to make use of. The different platforms are great because it allows you the variety of perspectives that you can take on board from all the different people who are contributing towards it. And what I like is also it's not just the obvious voices that are chiming in. You have people on the ground, you have different experts from different industries able to contribute towards it. So you get a very rich input, which will help you decide what you want to, how you want to decide about whatever it is you are talking about or discussing.